So, hi, I'm Joy Vernon with the Greater Seattle Astrology Tarot Reiki Meetup, and today it is June 20th, and at the very end of this month, Jupiter is going to leave its sign of exaltation, Cancer, and move into Leo, which is interestingly a very nice placement for Jupiter, and we'll learn more about that later. And then we're going to examine the story found in the Jupiter Decans via the tarot cards and apply that to an artist who has Jupiter in Leo, Grandma Moses. So I got a lot of really cool stuff lined up for you. So let's get going. And so here we are. Jupiter and Leo, find your light. And that is one of the paintings from Grandma Moses. I liked this one particularly because it is the perspective of being in the farmhouse looking out over the valley outside her window. And it's such a great because there's so much expansiveness in Grandma Moses's artwork. It's a really good metaphor for somebody that was, just a homebody and suddenly became very famous, which is a good metaphor for for Leo, for Jupiter in Leo. And so here we have our plan of attack for the day. We're going to do an overview of what Jupiter and Leo is, and then cover the basic Jupiter and Leo keywords as well as the tarot correspondences. Then I'll share that story of the Leo Decans based on the tarot cards. We've got our Jupiter and Leo profile, Grandma Moses, and then a practice so that you can learn from Grandma Moses and learn how to use how to use Jupiter in Leo, the energy of that, to find your light. So here's the overview of Jupiter in Leo. Jupiter enters Leo at the end of this month, and it'll be there for 1 year. It tends to be in a sign for about a year. This to me is one of the most interesting things that Jupiter, the sun is Leo's ruler, and Jupiter and the sun have a very interesting relationship because of the visible planets, Jupiter travels the most, follows the ecliptic, which is the sun's path through the sky. Jupiter follows that the most closely. And that's called the orbital inclination. So Jupiter has that relationship to the sun that makes it naturally carry some of the sun's brightness, leadership, regularity, authority. It carries some of those qualities. So Leo generally will also just bring out much of Jupiter's charisma, leadership, and self-expression. So our basic keywords for Jupiter: education, travel, expansion. It's the largest planet, so it tends to make things bigger. Success, excess, joviality, religion, leadership, generosity. Jupiter is considered the priest, the teacher, the advisor to the king, and the magistrate. Jupiter has a lot to do with generosity and good advice and supporting the king, the sun, the ruler. So those are some of the things to think about when we think about Jupiter. And Leo keywords: dramatic, confident, noble, flamboyant. It is in the spotlight. And that's just the time of year, this season. This is a Leo, the Leo season of the year is going to be that kind of end of July into August. It's the height of summer. The cardinal signs are the beginning of the season. The fixed signs are the height of the season, and the mutable signs transition out of a season into the next. So currently, we are in the Gemini season. Well, today's the 20th. We go into Cancer tomorrow. Currently, we're in the Gemini season, a mutable sign. It is transitioning us out of spring and into summer. And then starting tomorrow, a cardinal season, Cancer, from the sun's point of view. Um, so that seasonal energy is one of hotness, bright light, sun, longer days, sun high in the sky, that kind of energy. So that brings us those ideas of dramatic and in the spotlight. The tarot correspondences. So the Jupiter in the tarot, following the Golden Dawn correspondences, is the Wheel of Fortune. And so the people that don't follow the Golden Dawn primarily use the Emperor, because in the Tarot de Marseille, he's seated with his arm is out in such a way that and his legs are crossed in such a way that it forms the number four. Um, and so people see that because Jupiter is associated with the number four, and so people see that in the Emperor, and also the Emperor has a certain amount of leadership and charisma and some of those other things. But in the Golden Dawn tradition, it is the Wheel of Fortune. And I think that's very interesting. Jupiter is associated with spirituality. One of its archetypes is the priest. And so the Wheel of Fortune has this kind of spiritual energy around it, with the four cherubs being winged and up in the clouds. And the wheel brings things into being. And so we can see that the Wheel of Fortune is the spiritual level of emanation, basically, in some to give it a Kabbalistic term, whereas the world, the other Rider-Waite-Smith card with the four cherubs on it, is the manifestation level. So the wheel is the start of things, and then they manifest at the world. The Thoth deck has the four cherubs on the um, Hierophant, and I believe, and well, John can help me out, and the Chariot card, I think, although they're mixed up in the Chariot card. Um, and so the idea of coming into being, a lot of people interpret the wheel as that idea of chance, Fortuna's wheel. New comment. So I'm going to grab that, and John is probably helping me out. Hierophant and Universe. Okay, thank you. And like, I know there's different cards, Hierophant and Universe in the Thoth deck. Thank you, John. Yeah, so a lot of people focus on the idea of chance with the Wheel of Fortune, such as Fortuna's Wheel, and they even take it into the idea of like a roulette wheel, or games of chance or something like that, which does have a certain, Jupiter has like a kind of expanded sense of, Jupiter in Leo particularly has an expanded sense of confidence, because Jupiter is excess and Leo is confidence. And so the idea of gambling would be kind of a natural thing for Jupiter in Leo. But that sense of chance or opportunity, or like opportunity for expansion, is like a nice way of looking at that Wheel of Fortune card. And so then we go on to the Strength card, which is Leo. So Wheel of Fortune is Jupiter, Strength is Leo. And of course, we see the lion in this And this to me does have a lot of confidence to it. Empowerment is a word I like to use with it. I do think of it as an inner power because she is leaning over the lion. Um, and the lion is at the lower half of her body. So it's an inner power, a power over our subconscious, our instinctive nature. Um, and so but these work, I think, in a really interesting way because the strength card does have that lemniscate over her head, and the Wheel of Fortune with its spinning can follow that lemniscate pattern and talk about if you do it vertically, it can talk about that involution and evolution, coming down into manifestation, going up, evolving and changing, coming back down into manifestation. And so that's a really nice kind of combination that these two cards both support that kind of an interpretation. And just common kind of questions that come with the strength cards, such as some illustrations show the woman closing the lion's mouth, and some show her opening the lion's mouth. And that is more of an expression of sometimes we close the animal instinct, the active, loud part of us. Sometimes we open that. Sometimes we close the voice. Sometimes we open the voice. Some things like that. But we can start to see that idea of sometimes we go down and we work with this. Sometimes we come up and we're working with its opposite. So I think that there's a lot of those types of energies going on here with this Jupiter in Leo placement. And so then we go into the three decanic cards for Jupiter and Leo. Now, one other thing that I'm going to say before I go on to that was that because Jupiter is that planet of excess, one of the things that I noticed with all the cards that are ruled by Jupiter, um, which I did not make a slide for it because I didn't want to get bogged down talking about it. So the Jupiter, but now I have to remember it. So the Jupiter ruled cards are the Eight of Swords, the Six of Wands, the Four of Swords, the Two of Pentacles, and the Nine of Cups. And even within those, we can really see, I mean, the Two of Pentacles literally has a lemniscate on it. But even with the others, everything from that Eight of Swords, which is like complete being stuck, not having, feeling like you can't move forward, on up through the Six of Wands, which is victory. We can see that even the cards, the decanic cards ruled by Jupiter, have a wider swing, so to speak, of kind of emotional kind of affect to them. So, so I think that that's just a very interesting thing about the decanic cards that are ruled by Jupiter, that they do have the excess and the extremes are kind of highlighted there. So then we go into the three decan cards for Leo. And so the first one is the Five of Wands ruled by Saturn. And then the second decan is the Six of Wands. And like I said, these are out of order, sorry, ruled by Jupiter. So that's our card for this for Jupiter. And then Seven of Wands is going to be ruled by Mars. So Saturn, Jupiter, Mars is what's represented here. Um, 5, 6, 7. And so we're going to look at those three decans of Jupiter as a story. Obviously, Jupiter will be passing through all three of them. He only rules the middle one, but we'll be exploring that as the outline of a story. And then finally, the court card for Leo is the King of Wands. The kings are the fixed signs of their element, so fixed fire is Leo. So here are the three Leo decans. So this one I did put in order. Five, six, seven. Five of Wands is strife. My boyfriend calls it striving, which I think is a nice variation on that. I definitely confess that I followed the strife meaning a little bit more, conflict, that kind of thing, competition. There's a certain playful energy I think Leo brings out in this particular card that gives it. It's not as conflicted as the Five of Swords, for instance. In fact, the guy over on the left, a good friend of mine from the back in the days with the Denver Tarot meetup, said she thought it looked like a band major with his baton, saying, "Okay, everybody, this is what we're going to be doing. Get ready. It's time to get started." And other interpretations of this card, for instance, Robin Wood comes to mind, are a lot more competitive looking or a game look. They look like they're playing a game. So a lot of that playfulness can come out with this card. But at base, it's still a five, and the fives are generally ascribed to Mars, and so the idea of conflict is still a primary meaning. And then we go into the Six of Wands victory, and that one's pretty easy with the laurel wreath for victory and the parade and all of that. And then the Seven of Wands, this one's ruled by the Decan ruler is Mars. The Decan ruler for the Five of Wands was Saturn. The Decan ruler for the seven is Mars, and we've got our guy now up on a height, uh, taking on six wands by himself, but because he has a higher ground, that is going to be an easier fight for him. And we're going to start to expand on this and explore some other meanings as we go forward here. So, the way that I see these three cards is that engaging a conflict, number five, and winning a simple victory, number six, gives you the confidence to take on more difficult tasks, number seven. And that to me is like a key to understanding the decans of this sign and to understanding these three cards. Conflict presents itself, we take care of it very quickly. That win gives us that confidence to go on to engaging more challenges and more challenging situations. So the questions become, what simple victory can you set for yourself? Like, and we'll talk about this in more depth later. This is going to be the actual practice, but I'll get your wheels spinning now, so to speak. Maybe some objectives you have, maybe some goals that you're trying to reach over the next year. Maybe if you're really stepping back or if you're in a Saturn return, maybe you're thinking big scale and want to think about goals that you're trying to reach in the next 12 years, which is Jupiter's cycle. It takes 12 years to go around the zodiac. What simple victory can you set for yourself to get started? What can you do that's competitive, but that will most likely produce a win so that you can share that with others and get the spotlight for a moment so you can have that little victory parade there? These simple victories give you that confidence to proceed with the bigger goals. And out of Leo, we move into Virgo, and the first decan of Virgo is the Eight of Pentacles. So we can see once we've made it through Leo, we really go into it's like, I've got it now. This is really working. I know how to do this and I can do it regularly. It's no longer a struggle. I'm no longer, confused by things or struggling with things. I know what I'm doing and I've got my system down. So here is our Jupiter and Leo profile. And so I just went to AstroSeek, which has a really good celebrity database to search. And I just searched for artists with Jupiter and Leo. And then I ordered it by time frame because I like working with golden age of illustration people. Grandma Moses is definitely within that category because that extends up to 1980 technically. But I generally work with people that are working more between like 1880 and 1920. But when I saw Grandma Moses on the list, I could not. I'm just like, oh yeah, she's my person. Aubrey Beardsley was on the list with Jupiter and Leo. There was a Rudolf Steiner has Jupiter and Leo and is an artist. A lot of the artists with Jupiter and Leo had used very bright colors. There was a impressionist who I hadn't heard of before. I'm not real knowledgeable about art, and there were some other people as well. But those are some of the examples, and I just was like, yay, Grandma Moses, let's do her. So, born in 1860 is Anna Mary Robertson. She married her husband's last name was Moses. She was an American folk artist. She was known for becoming an artist in her late 70s and gaining huge popularity. She eventually was featured on the covers of both Time and Life magazines, and she died in 1961 at the age of 101. So painting maybe gives you long life, who knows? And here is her chart. And so you can see that she's got a Capricorn ascendant with Mars on the ascendant. And that right there will give you Mars on the ascendant will give you some charisma, regardless of where your Jupiter is placed. She has her sun over here in Virgo. I am using the Koch house system, which you can see right here. And so that gives her the sun in the eighth house and Jupiter and Venus both in Leo, which we also, as soon as Jupiter moves into Leo, Venus is currently there. So they will both, Jupiter and Venus will be in Leo at the same time for us this year as well. And so, and actually, she might. The nodes are moving. Modes are moving out of Pisces and Virgo into Aquarius and Leo. So her nodes are at the beginning of those signs, which is the end of the nodal transit through a sign. But it looks like she's coming up on a nodal return as well. But anyway, so she's got that Jupiter and Venus in the seventh house in the Koch house system. That would be the eighth household sign. And that would put this over into the ninth household whole sign. Um, but there's some very interesting transits that I will be talking about. She has her moon in Gemini conjunct Uranus in the fifth house of creativity. Whole signs, that's actually the sixth house. But the first painting that she did as an adult, she liked to paint as a child. But the first time she returned to painting as an adult, Jupiter was in Leo. And so it would have been crossing that Moon Uranus conjunction and would have been transiting her fifth house. So that's just an example. And so we'll I'll be talking about some of the transits. I'm not pulling up any transit charts for this. I'll just give you the bare bones, but I wanted you to have the chart so that you could, if you are more versed in astrology, you could compare it and check it out. So currently, there is a retrospective of her work happening at the Smithsonian, and that exhibit was from November 2025 through July 2026. So it did start with Jupiter in Cancer, but it's going through Jupiter's movement into Leo. So this is a Jupiter return for Grandma Moses, and guess what? She has got a exhibit up right now at the Smithsonian. And one of the quotes from an article on the Smithsonian website about the exhibit said, through nearly 90 works, the exhibition, and she created almost 2,000 works. They estimate between 1,500 and 2,000, but Britannica says 2,000. So I'm like, hey, if Britannica says it's got to be true, right? So through nearly 90 works, the exhibition reveals how Moses painted what she knew with an instinct for cinematic composition. That sounds like Jupiter and Leo, doesn't it? Tiny dramas, keyword for Leo, unfolding within broad panoramas, great keyword for Jupiter, where every figure played a role in the theater, Leo keyword, of daily life. So, and even the idea of every figure, there's a certain generosity. Everyone gets included. That the I don't know. That's a stretch to say that that's a Jupiter keyword. But the more the merrier might be a Jupiter keyword. So yeah. So very, very interesting. I don't know if the person that wrote the article was recognized that Grandma Moses was in a Jupiter return and wrote that way, or if that was just total accident. So very, very interesting quote there. So here's the Grandma Moses origin story. And she was she was born into a family of 10 kids. I think she was the oldest. And at age 12, she had to go off to work. And she like was a housekeeper and did housekeeping types of duties. And she worked from age 12 to 15. And then somewhere along there, she married her husband. And I don't know exactly how old she was when she married him. But she one of the so 12 age 12 is a Jupiter return. It's your first Jupiter return. And one of those houses that she worked at, one of her employers noticed that she was interested in art and showed her some a book of Currier and Ives or some Currier and Ives print or something like that, which she was highly, highly influenced by Currier and Ives. But when she first found that, she was somewhere between that first Jupiter return and at age 12 and age 15, which would be the opening square of the Jupiter cycle. And so if you don't know what I mean by that, let me explain that. So Jupiter takes 12 years to go around the entire zodiac. That means that approximately every 3 years, it's going to hit a new 3/4 of the way around. So this is the opening square or 90 degrees forward. And then this is the opposition, 180 degrees. And then you get your closing square here, and that's going to be 270. And then you're back home again to the return. And the way to think about any planetary cycle like this is to think of Usually it works nicely to think of the moon phases. So a return is a coming together, it's a reset. So that's like a new moon. And this is like a first quarter waxing moon where the moon is growing in size. And then this is like a full moon where you have achievement and fulfillment and that kind of thing. And then you come around to the closing square, and this is the waning. This is as the last quarter moon, so it's going into a waning crescent all through here. And this is, uh, you know, uh, kind of uh, trimming things down, dialing down the energy, kind of getting ready to close. You can think of it as going to bed for the night or something, like just taking care of all the little things and slowing down until you get back to your return, to your new moon phase. So likewise, when Jupiter is in a opening square to the natal placement, you've got opportunity growing. When it's an when you're at the opposition, that is the fulfillment of an opportunity. And the closing square is transitioning towards that next opportunity and then coming back to home base again and resetting your intention. So we can see that the seeds of her eventual becoming this famous artist, eventually becoming this famous artist, were planted very young. She did a lot of painting, and I mean, talk about, can't even afford paints. She used fruit juice for paints and uh, just whatever she could get her hands on. Um, and so that and that was her as a child. So I divided this, and I want to be clear. I divided the story into our tarot card headings. So Five of Wands strife, Six of Wands victory, Seven of Wands valor, and the Eight of Pentacles prudence. And this is not talking about at now. I am no longer talking about the three decans of Leo. Now I'm just talking about the story that's produced from those tarot cards. And so what happened to her late in life is that she developed arthritis and she did embroidery. And once the arthritis hit, she couldn't manipulate the needle anymore. So she switched to painting. And so in 1932, she began doing embroidery. That was age 72, and her Jupiter was in Leo. That was a Jupiter return for her. And so that Jupiter return, the new moon Jupiter for her was like, oh, hey, let's do something new. Let's start doing some kind of artsy thing. Let's do embroidery. And I think she had also done some quilting and other things. I don't believe this was brand new to her, but I've got all my sources, by the way, listed at the end. But at 1932, she took up embroidery, and that would have been a Jupiter return. However, in 1936, that's when she developed the arthritis and had to stop embroidering and start painting. Interestingly, Jupiter was going through that year, 1936, Jupiter was mostly going through Sagittarius and then entered Capricorn at the end of the year. I could not find an exact date for when the arthritis started bothering her enough to switch to painting. But it is Sagittarius is her whole sign, 12th house. And even in the quadrant house system, by the time we get to the end of the year in 1936, we're definitely into our 12th house. And 12th house can be a house of sickness, it can be a house of retreat from the things that we normally do. So that makes some really good sense there. because that very creative part of her was no longer able to function as well. Six of Wands, Victory. So she started painting and just kind of went wild with painting. She exhibited her paintings over at a drugstore in town, and she sold them for like $3 for one size and $5 for another size or something. It was like $3 or $5 for her paintings. And so an art collector from New York, I think, uh, found her work there at the drugstore and bought everything that she had, went out to visit her, bought everything she had at home, and just really loved her work and took it back to the city with him. And so this was in 1938. Jupiter was in Aquarius at opposition. So this is what we would call the full moon Jupiter, or the full Jupiter, where Jupiter is at the full moon position from her natal Jupiter. That also, we can say that hopefully this isn't getting crazy, but that's also the seventh derived house from her natal position. So the natal position being the first house, and then we count around to seven when we get to Aquarius, and so that would be the seventh from the natal Jupiter position. And the seventh house is partners, allies, people that will help you. And so the idea that somebody discovered her at that full Jupiter phase, as well as became like a supporting ally to her, or partner to her, is very significant there. And then we go into the Seven of Wands, Valor. So this is the guy up on the cliff fighting. This led to an exhibition of unknown artists at the MoMA in New York, then a solo exhibition. And so October 9th, 1940, there was a solo exhibition at Galerie Saint-Étienne called What a Farm Wife Painted. She declined to attend. Now, this is another year or so later, 1938. Jupiter and Aquarius at opposition. 1939 was an exhibition at MoMA with the of unknown artists. And then the solo exhibition at this Galerie Saint-Étienne was October 9th, 1940, What a Farm Wife Painted. And so she didn't go. She had the opportunity to go and she just wanted to stay home. That's Jupiter and Taurus. So that was that closing square, that last quarter moon when it's like, oh, I've had my fun. I'm done. I'm just gonna like clean up for the night and go to bed, or I'm gonna, whatever the metaphor might be. And so those that have that closing square, there might be something in some 12-year cycle that you're like, over the next 3 years, I really want to phase this out. So she was just like, this is really cool. This guy from the drugstore got me a couple exhibits. That's awesome. I don't need to go to them. I mean, I'm making up what she's thinking, but that's what the astrology says. She's like, I don't really care that much. But then we move forward out of the three decans of Leo into that first decan of Virgo. So 1943, she painted the work that would become her uh, the highest grossing piece, the highest selling piece. That 1943, Jupiter was in Leo again. She was at a return. So this whole cycle here is taking place over 12 years from her uh, one Jupiter return when she began the embroidery through this other Jupiter return where she ended up painting the work. Now, of course, she didn't sell it at the time. This is a posthumous price when it was auctioned at Christie's for 1 point something 36 million or something like that, 1.3 something million dollars at Christie's. Um, but which is a much more recent thing. But at the time that she painted it, she was in a Jupiter return, and so you can see that even though she was like, I don't know, I don't really even want to go to this exhibition, that she didn't stop painting and she continued, and she was getting more, her work was becoming more and more significant. She went on to produce about 2,000 paintings in her lifetime. And so that painting that sold at Christie's for 1.3 something million is this one, and it's called Sugaring Off, and it is when they harvest the maple syrup and make the maple sugar. And so that's what they're doing here is they're pouring the syrup into the snow where it crystallizes in the cold and becomes sugar, which the best thing in the world. So delicious. And you can say this guy is carrying, he's got a yoke over his shoulders. He's carrying the buckets of the maple syrup. And there's some oxen or something. And it's just, like I said, there's a lot of detail in her paintings, lots of characters, big, expansive landscapes, lots of little detail. This little kid, is he throwing it almost looks like maybe he's waving at somebody. Almost looked like he is throwing a snowball, but I think he's okay. There's a little dog down here, a little kid with a dog talking to a man, just lots of little details. So, that's a really nice example of her work, I think. Let's see if we've got any new. Yeah, thank you for saying that. So that sounds demeaning, farm wife instead of her name. And yes, and certainly the idea that it's a selling point. It's like somebody unexpected. And they're maybe trying to set expectations with because she was doing folk art or primitive art and so that's very express that word farm wife is very expressive, but that is a very significant thing. She did not take the name Grandma Moses. The New York Times gave it to her. They just called her that. Now, they hadn't even met her. Now it turned out that she was the quintessential grandma and she had the look and she acted the part, at least for the press. Who knows what she was like in person? And um, and there are a lot of there's one article, there's a lot of response to that, like from feminists, a lot of um more formal artists rejected her work because it was folk art or primitive art. So she was rejected in many ways by the artistic community. She was rejected by feminists because she painted scenes of home and family, and she let people call her things like Grandma Moses, and she uh, talked equally at the same time. She would talk about her art. She would talk about embroidery or quilting right in the same breath as she would talk about art. To her, they were all things that you do with your hands, you know? And other artists would poo-poo that she would make those equations. And so there was a surprising amount of Seven of Wands, like rejection of her that she had to either ignore or fight off. She probably ignored it. But you know, I don't know her personality type well enough. She was a Virgo. It just kind of keep on keeping on, right? Um, so in that Gemini, I think that Gemini Uranus Moon Uranus conjunction in Gemini, that's going to give her so much innovation, outside the box thinking. She might have just been on a different level, and you know, I don't know, but it that's a really good point, and it's very significant. There was a one article on feminism and her and Grandma Moses, a feminist look at her, called the white-haired girl, because in those days people just said girl for anybody, for any female being. And she's got white hair, she is a grandma, and these articles are referring to her as a girl. um let's see what the comments are. Yeah, in her retrospective, were there examples of her embroidery or other fabric arts? Really good, excellent question. I do not know. I got the images that I'm using here from Wiki Arts, and there was one, I didn't use it. I didn't use very many. She has about 38, I think, images up on Wiki Arts. Um, One of them was she did yarn painting where she used a not a thick thread, but thicker than embroidery floss, where she used wool to kind of fill in an entire canvas with detail that's not quite, it's she called it yarn painting. It's not quite embroidery, it's not quite cross stitch or anything like that. Or needlepoint. It was more like long running stitches. But you can see that example that was just one that I noticed that's there on WikiArts. Um, but I don't know what what the retrospective that's currently up has. So that's an excellent question, and chances are you could find the catalog online. So, okay, cool. Good. I'm glad that came up. Okay, so now we're getting into the practice. Oh, and by the way, this this origin story just takes her through 32 to 43. That's just about one 12-year cycle. That's one Jupiter cycle. She worked, it was, I think, 23 years until she died. And so she's worked as a painter for almost two Jupiter cycles. And so we've got a whole other Jupiter cycle of increased recognition, becoming quite famous. She ended up getting representation. That happened when Jupiter was in Virgo over her sun, but also that is her quadrant style eighth house. And getting representation, that's when somebody else invests in you. Eighth house, they invest in you. And so she got representation when Jupiter is transiting her eighth house. And then from that, they started getting her international exhibits. They got her first Christmas card deal. And then she ended up, Hallmark bought the rights to her Christmas cards. I mean, her cards were extraordinarily popular. Probably still are, I'm not sure. I don't buy Christmas cards. And uh, and then from there, it went on through her next Jupiter return. After that, I think in 1955, she went through being on the cover of Time, and then in 1955, she was interviewed on TV by Edward R. Murrow. And so, there's a whole nother Jupiter cycle after this that went on with increasing fame and fortune for her. So now we're going into the practice. Find your light. So, what's the big goal that you want? And you can you can put any timeline you want around this. I would suggest maybe a 1 year goal while Jupiter is in the sign of Leo, or a 12-year goal so that especially for those that are in a Jupiter return right now that natally have Jupiter in Leo going looking 12 years from now until your next Jupiter return. But you could look at any time frame, the person that's in the closing square might want to, kind of like, how can I work through my Seven of Wands issues until I get over the next 3 years until I get into a Jupiter return, and so on and so forth. So no one way of doing it, but be thoughtful about what a decent timeline looks like for you. So, what's a big goal that you want? Of course, we always break our goals into tasks. And so, this is the very first painting that Grandma Moses did as an adult. In 1918, Grandma Moses, and this was when Jupiter was if I remember correctly, this was when Jupiter was transiting her fifth house of creativity, and transiting her moon, which is our emotions. It can be our emotional fulfillment. It can be our private life. Remember, even when she had an exhibit, she didn't want to go because her creativity is part of her private life. But Uranus is there, the unexpected, like unexpected that, a woman that lived on a farm all her life suddenly became a well-known painter. Um, and so 1918, the Jupiter transited her fifth house of creativity along with her moon, and moon can represent the home, which remember the first image had the curtains. She was in the house looking out, so the moon is the home, and then Jupiter is the expansive wide world that is out there. Or in this case, with moon Uranus, it could be Uranus, could be the expansive wide world that's out there. And so this is the first thing that she did. And what happened? Five of Wands. She ran out of wallpaper. And this is a fireboard. I did not bother to look that up. I assume that it is the wood that is above the mantelpiece over a fire. She ran out of wallpaper, and so she painted this fireboard with house paints that were left over. And this is what she made, and it's very beautiful. And you can tell she didn't have a whole lot of paint to work with. But I mean, just to use leftover bits and pieces, what a gorgeous piece this is. Oh, here it is right there. It was transiting our house of creativity. So that is that I remembered that correctly. Yay. 1918. And so what house is Leo in your chart? What house is Jupiter about to enter in your chart? Um, and so if you don't have your chart or don't really understand the houses or whatever, don't worry about it. You can still pick a goal. You can pick a first thing that you want to do, to express. Jupiter is transiting Leo, even if you don't have uh, Jupiter in Leo in your chart, you can still take advantage of the Leo creativity at this time if you would like to. But if you know what house Leo is in your chart and what house that therefore Jupiter will be transiting, that will help you focus on what you might like to work on. Okay. So the next step is going to be our Five of Wands. That was kind of the big picture that we just looked at. This is the strife section where for Grandma Moses, she in this example, like in one aspect of her life, she got arthritis and it was like too painful. It's like, oh, I can't do this anymore. I'm in conflict. What should I do? And in the example of the fireboard, she ran out of wallpaper. Oh, I'm in conflict. What can I do? I don't have any wallpaper left. So then we go to the Six of Wands victory. So, what is a competitive task that you can complete and publicly share as a win. So when Grandma Moses got arthritis and started painting, she's like, you know what? I could put these for sale. People seem to like them. I could put them up for sale at the drugstore. They said they'd had room for them. Okay. So she put her paintings up for sale at the drugstore, price between $3 and $5. She was just maybe trying to recoup fees for the materials she was using. She certainly wasn't, well, I don't know. This was obviously in the 1930s. So maybe that was very expensive. I have no idea. But she probably wasn't making a whole lot of money. And then when she did that, she was discovered by that art collector. And that was when Jupiter was opposite her natal Jupiter, and that can represent when an ally or a partner uh, joins you. And so that's another question. If when is your next Jupiter opposition? Because that opposition, Jupiter opposition, was that full moon energy, the full moon metaphor. So this is when Jupiter is opposite your natal Jupiter, and so you are really stepping into your light. You're coming into your full moon phase, your full light of people, other people recognizing who you are and what you have to offer. And so when is that next Jupiter opposition coming for you? Or just more simply, if you don't want to mess with the astrology, just focus on what you want this victory to be. A little thing that you can do for a small victory. And then we go on forward. Here we go to the Seven of Wands, Valor. So, what's the next big hurdle that you can approach now? Use the energy and confidence from your small win to come to this bigger task with a more positive, optimistic attitude. So, Grandma Moses, her first solo show is the one she didn't attend, and that was Jupiter and Taurus, that closing square. And so, how will you push through feelings that it's over, not worth it? You've already achieved what you can. How will you push through? How will you take that confidence and apply it to more diligence, more effort? Put even more effort. I know so many people, this is like a pet peeve of mine. I know so many people that accomplish something like they publish a book or make a tarot deck or something like that that can pretty much anything. And they put a lot of effort. It was hard for them to complete that, right? Because it's hard to do those things. It is a lot of work, and with no promise of reward. And so you do it, and then you're trying to sell it. And so you're shopping it around, you're doing this, self-publishing or some kind of self-sales, and then these people they swing back and they want to fix it. They want to make it better and they want to start redoing it. It's like, no, do not do that. Go to the next thing. It's over. It's done. If it was bad, oh well. It's probably better than you think. Don't try to redo the thing you've already done. Move to the next thing. That's the Seven of Wands. That so many people just want to stay in their victory, stay in their Six of Wands, and just be like, I did a really good job with this. I can make it a little bit better if that will help sell more or whatever. Just like it's over and done, move on to the next thing. And that's the energy of that Seven of Wands, being able to fight through those feelings that you've already done everything you can, or God forbid that you want to go back and redo it. Um, so this is what's your plan? What will be your plan when you get your small win? How will you parlay that small win using the using the gambling metaphor for Jupiter? How will you, or for the Wheel of Fortune, how will you parlay that small win into bigger wins? Um, what's your plan for that? And then your Eight of Pentacles, prudence. How will you translate this energy into that perpetual motion machine, into that ongoing work, the assembly line, if you will, of the Eight of Pentacles? She went on to produce about 2,000 paintings in her lifetime. At that Jupiter return, she painted the work that sugaring off, they called it, that would become her highest selling piece. Um, and then 12 years later, in 1955, she was interviewed by Edward R. Murrow at the age of 95. That was her eighth Jupiter return. And then posthumously, she has that retrospective at the Smithsonian, which is this, she's coming into that other Jupiter return again. And her work is continuing long beyond her. Remember, her first adult painting on the fireboard was Jupiter crossing her fifth house. A fifth house is a house of creativity. It's also considered your legacy. And she really did leave a legacy to the world of a huge work of huge body of work. And so that is coinciding with her, in this retrospective is coinciding with that Jupiter return. So when's your next Jupiter return? What will you be celebrating then? So thinking ahead, once you've pushed through that I'm going to keep going after I won. I've got more confidence now to take on bigger challenges. Once you've pushed through that and you get into the Eight of Pentacles, and it's just like, this is easy. Now I can just do a million of these. What do you imagine the next really big victory is going to be? Here are the sources. Um, Mostly articles. Here's the Astro Databank chart for Grandma Moses. Oh, I forgot to say, it's a Rodden rating of B. So that's like from a biography, I think. It's usually more along the lines of so and so was born during the morning or at night or, whatever in the late afternoon, that type of thing. But B is still pretty good. Um, Wikipedia Britannica, this is the article on the Smithsonian that I used, and so on and so forth. Um, Donations, gratefully and gracefully accepted. If you ever want to throw any money my way, I will be happy to take it, especially with Jupiter entering my whole sign second house. um, and yes, Alan, I do tarot readings and astrology consultations for a living. So you can always I don't even say that anywhere. You can always book a session with me. Maybe I say it here. Thank you for attending Jupiter and Leo. Find your light. So there's my website, joyvernon.com, and I need to add a sentence there that says I do tarot readings and astrology. Remember to stop by my blog, which is on my website, but you can get there from completelyjoyous.com. We have tons of great events at the Greater Seattle Tarot Meetup, and you can subscribe to me on YouTube. And I think that is the end. So before I close the screen share, I do want to explain what I meant by we could have a tarot spread from this. So this Find Your Light practice, which we're going to do as your Five of Wands, your conflict that you push through, your initial conflict that kind of gets you started. For her, it was she ran out of wallpaper, or then later on, she got arthritis. What is a conflict that's going to trigger this? And so that would be card number one. What is your conflict that triggers your opportunity? The second card would be your victory. So what is this small victory that you can share publicly that will give you confidence to move forward. So that's card 2, the small victory that you can share publicly so that you can move forward. That's card 2. Card 3 would be valor, your confidence to fight past whatever new conflicts come up. The next big hurdle you can approach. Use the energy and confidence of your smaller win to come to this bigger task with a more positive, optimistic attitude. Optimism is associated with Jupiter. Um, so the third position of your, it's going to be a 4 card tarot spread. The third position is going to be how you translate your confidence into the next thing, how you translate your confidence into the next thing that you do. And then your 8 of Pentacles, prudence, that's where you get into your assembly line. You just really know what you're doing. And you're just doing it on a regular basis. Whatever this plan is, this goal that you have now, it's just like, I just do it every day. I just get it done. I'm doing it all the time. So, so what is the conflict that is triggering your need to achieve this goal right now? What is the first win, an easy win that you can do? How can you use the confidence from that win to push through to something more complicated, more complex? And then how do you turn this into just a routine so that you're accomplishing this all the time? We are done for the day. Hopefully, this gave you kind of educated you and inspired you and uh, gave you a nice way to spend your morning. Thanks for the hearts. Yeah, you're welcome, guys. It's been brilliant. Oh, good. You found your light. Aw, thanks, guys.